I'd like to change gears and get to the last panel of the day, where we'll be discussing about partnerships among hubs. So what is the state of our ecosystem? What kind of startups, what kind of partnerships are we actually having among this ecosystem? And I'd like to introduce the panelists for this next session. We'll start with Ms. Esther Mwikali. Ms. Esther Mwikali. She is the engagement advisor at Ninja and Asec, and engagement advisor at Asec, and a project manager at Ninja Accelerator. Esther Mwikali, karibu sana. A round of applause for her, she comes up. Next, we have Mr. James Odede, co-founder of Lake Hub. Lake Hub has been spotlighted as an innovation hub and another proud member of Asec. A round of applause as he comes up. We also have Ms. Beatrice Maisori, Director of International Business Development and Marketing Research at GVC Growth Concepts Limited. A round of applause for her as she comes up. We have Mr. Kingsley Kipuri, Strategy and Partnerships SME Advisory Unit Executive Office of the President. A round of applause for him as he comes up as well. They will be moderated by our able Vice Chair at Asec and our Managing Director at Pangaea Trust, Anne Lawi. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Grace, for kind introduction, and welcome all the panelists for the conversation today. And I would want us to start with a quick brief about yourself and the work you do. So I start here. Esther.
I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Esther Mwikali. I'm the engagement advisor for Asec. One hat. The other hat, I work for Growth Africa as a project manager and running the JICA Ninja Accelerator here in Kenya. I'm really excited to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Odede, and I'm the founder of Lake Hub, which is an innovation hub based in Kisumu. We deal in three main areas, which is startup support, and we also work in scaling young people in technology. It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kingsley Kipuri. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at the team called SME Advisory Unit that's based out of the Office of the President. And I think our work is to identify, highlight, and kind of coordinate cross-government activities that we think will be catalytic for the SME space. That's quite broad, including the startup world. We try to be quite agile, including partnerships on the private sector world, which has included a really, I think, fairly good relationship with Asec. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm just extremely proud of the work you've done so far. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Beatrice Maisori. I wear two hats, so I will say the first hat is I am an international business strategy consultant, but also in investment consultancy, working between Africa and Asia. And some of you who do not know how to speak a word in Mandarin, you can follow me later. And I can allow you, just maybe to say ni hao or something close to this. Yeah, so I support SMEs that are looking for linkages in the Asia world, but also for investors from the other side who are looking for opportunities here. And I mainly concentrate on the area of industrial value chains and how we can be able to build more linkages in the industrial value chains, but as well from my second hat, which is in academia, international business strategy and entrepreneurship, is how we can be able to capture value and how we can be able to allow our SMEs to build value chains and be able to be integrated into the global value chains. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, just to set the stage for today's conversation, some of the things that have come out today is one, as hubs and enablers and startup ecosystem organization, we are known to work in silos. And that in some areas, it's driven because we we are working with similar, or we are working with the same partners. We are competing for resources. We are competing for the same pipeline. We are a very small ecosystem. But also at the same time, we have, out of the journey of creating Asec, it has been very clear that on our own we can't make it. We have to work together. So I would want to hear from your thinking and also understanding the dynamics that we are operating in. For you, Esther, how can we drive value through collaboration within ourselves as Hub as we grow the ecosystem, not deviating from our day-to-day knowing that we are competing for the same resources and partners?
Thank you, Anne. Competition is good, and for sure competition is good. It's what makes the market better. But for such a young ecosystem, we need to come together and work together. The reason why, even when Asec started, it started from a point of need. There was a big project, we've heard about that big project, and we wanted to come together and say that we are going to have the voice of coming together and ensuring that when some of these projects are coming to the country, they're being administered by the local partners, and they're being done by us because it's being run for startups who we work with and startups who we understand more than international partners. So it starts from a point of need of actually coming together and interacting with each other. But at the same time, it's also that when we work together, we can create more impact together. So I love this new concept of what we're doing. We call them consortiums. I'm sure now it's a normal thing now. We're all forming consortiums to try and bid on bigger programs. Not because that no one can do it alone. I'm sure each and every company or each and every ISO can do it here alone. But because if we do it together, we can create more impact, we can have a wider reach, and at the same time, we can also fill in the gaps for each other, because I feel every different ISO has a unique point and a unique proposition what they bring to the community. I think that's where I can start off.
All right, thank you so much. And to build onto that, James, do you think as an ecosystem, there is some aspect that we are not actively building on to continue building on the collaborations that we need to do better? And the reason why I'm saying that is because we have seen when we are sourcing for pipeline, the businesses to support, you'll have some businesses hopping from one hub to the next, but you don't have a mechanism all the way as of now to be able to weed out this and be able to know where they are. What do we need to do better, for example, to address some of those challenges we're experiencing?
Well, thank you, Anne. The ecosystem in Kenya is, as far as entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem is concerned, is still fairly young. So we still have a long way to go. When it comes to collaboration opportunities, I think that was one of the areas where I was expecting, and I'm still expecting, Asec will help us solve. Because this is a body that was formed out of, through a partnership model. Many hubs, if not all, ESOs came together, and so they need to form an association. And to show that they believe in it, they actually pay annual subscription fees. You know, they're paying money to the association. So it means that at least there is a common body that we all can, can utilize as a trust arbitrator, in spaces where people don't trust each other, because trust is the very, very first component before collaborations happen. And in an environment where we perceive that resources are limited, collaboration becomes quite a challenge. So Asec could really, really help in fostering that, because at the end of the day, we call ourselves enablers, meaning there's a common mandate that we have as organizations, which is to see that the Kenyan startup ecosystem thrive. And it can only thrive if we all work together. A lot of the hubs are structured different. Some are businesses, some are non-profits, some are consultants, some are maybe government. So all this diversity can bring complexity in a way that collaboration will not be natural. And I think if we work through Asec, we have a better chance to ensure these collaborations happen. I see Asec also to becoming that single source of truth in terms of what work the ESOs have done in the country. So for instance, if Asec could have database of all entrepreneurs or all startups that have been supported at different stages by which organization, we can at some point make it easy even for us to quantify our efforts collectively. Today, one startup or one entrepreneur could receive support from 10 hubs, and still the ecosystem collectively cannot pinpoint that we did make a contribution in such a person's progress as a business. So if Asec could, make this together and we use this data that, okay, each and everyone played a role, and for that reason the ecosystem is getting better, collaboration will become a lot more natural in the future. Yeah. Because you really need to take stock. What has the collaboration done? And I think Asec can help us do that.
I want to jump in right there,
Yeah.
James. And before I joined Asec, I would say Asec could do. But I was hit by hard reality that Asec is us.
Sure.
Us who are seated here. So when we keep on saying Asec will do, it comes back to us, right?
Yeah,
It reflects back to us.
Yeah.
But what is the role of us enablers in terms of making the collaboration happen and building the building blocks for
Yeah.
making it a reality?
Well, collaboration happens, but we might not see it because the scale is still too small. It could be Lakehub and Growth Hub are doing something. It could be Lakehub and Pangaea doing something. But when collaboration becomes, when it becomes obvious that there's collaboration happening, when the scale is large, and so therefore individual hubs doing something might not be enough. There needs to be an ecosystem approach. So for that ecosystem approach to happen, we need a vehicle to use that ecosystem approach. So that's why I mentioned Asec. But then in terms of hubs, and Esther just talked about consortiums, I can sample in this space here, so there's many that are already doing consortiums and doing projects, some successful, some are not successful. Yet we still don't feel there's enough collaboration. So I think for that collaboration to be at a point where we actually seeing the value, it needs to come from an ecosystem approach, and therefore we need a body to make that happen. So the role of these hubs is, of course, the consortiums are there, which is already happening. The next level is how can we have a top-down kind of an angle where we look at Kenya as one ecosystem, not segregated in terms of Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, and then we come up with a strategy or rather a method that can ensure all the players have a role to play. Yeah. And I think for that to happen, we need to utilize the association. So it's not the association to do it, but us utilizing the association as a vehicle, to facilitate that. Yeah.
I like that point, and I'm coming from a point of 4 years ago.
Yeah.
As an ecosystem player, you felt like most of the time you need to do things alone because there is no framework, or you feel like the other person will not be so open to collaboration or to working with you.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, the last 2-3 years, you get called to almost all the ecosystem players when there is something that needs to be done. Not because they can't do jointly, because they know the value of joining together and working towards the common goal.
Yeah.
So I wanted to acknowledge that. I have seen growth, but I think we can be able to do more.
Yeah.
So Kingsley, working for a government agency that supports SMEs and startups, I know I have seen you put together a platform, conversation driving innovation and entrepreneurship. How can we continue contributing more to consolidated frameworks towards building the ecosystem?
Thank you, Anne. I think consolidated frameworks to build the ecosystem. So I think our driving mindset right now, I think we are really just trying to remind ourselves, which is quite obvious, that the center has to be the entrepreneur. I think because of the size of government, it can become quite insular, and the focus can become the policy, or the focus can become the activity or the program, and becomes quite removed for the entrepreneur. We can't overstate, I'm not sure how many actual entrepreneurs are here physically or on the call joining us virtually, but we just cannot overstate how important that innovator is. I mean, I don't think it's it's unnoted by anybody here, just the desperate need for jobs, the desperate need for growth, and the volume of problems that we need to solve. So when you have young, bright minds who are risk takers and who are backing themselves to solve those issues, they are just so central. So once we center that person, I think our mindset has really been about what does value mean for them. And I think we recently got some quite sobering feedback when we spent some time with SMEs, not necessarily startups, but around the country, and the feedback was a lot of them were not getting value from the regulatory environment, and second, a lot of them felt it was purely extractive, and at worst even coercive, was saying, I comply when I have to, I comply when I'm threatened, and I get no value from this. So I think we're thinking deeply about how do we recenter a lot of that around true value for the entrepreneur. At worst, you want to be neutral and not extracting from them. At best, you want to be valuable. So I think the combination of entrepreneur-centered value and then targeting the things you want, which is jobs and growth for us. So we're thinking a lot around what is that profile of a growth-oriented entrepreneur, high growth potential, that's the innovative, maybe tech enabled, maybe even not, to be honest, from our perspective. And then saying, how do you really aggressively profile them, target them, and then have a really tailored incentive portfolio that's really incentivizing them to grow. And trusting that formality and compliance will come later. And tax revenue as well, because we're often guilty of leading with tax today, not tomorrow. So that's the process we're following. I think a big gap that I think this room is well placed to support is data. A real challenge for targeted policy, and I'm sure Bwana and Florence and the rest share this issue, is just a lack of data. So you can sit in a policy room and say, we want to target this kind of entrepreneur, this kind of startup, and you can't find them. And you don't have the data of this number in this county doing this kind of work. So if you want agri-tech SMEs and you want to give them all the benefits in the world, where do you find them? So I think the role of partnerships is so crucial. I think that's why we've taken the partnership with Asec and the specific hubs and accelerators and incubators here so seriously, because we realize that a lot of the data for now is sitting on that side of the table while we work up to have the value-based incentive and value-based regulatory environment. And slowly, as people begin to embrace the regulatory environment and formalize, the data will come. But I think that's why we take this partnership so seriously. In terms of frameworks, I think once we center the entrepreneur, lead with value, and try things, I think slowly the formal frameworks honestly will start to emerge. But I think this room has a really great role to play in terms of convening power. I'm glad we're here. I think all agencies, I haven't seen academia here. I'm not sure if they are, and I haven't met anybody. They're here? Wonderful, wonderful, there we go. I think if you have academia, you have government, you have the private sector players and finance, I think you've got then a really strong group for a knowledge economy and for an innovation pipeline. And then I think around that now we can have more formal engagements. But I think starting with these and building towards the really formal frameworks that we can hold ourselves accountable to over time, I don't think is a bad route to go.
Thank you. Data, like we can be able to organize ourselves along data. And that, for me, is a very strong point because we play at different phases or different value chain of supporting entrepreneurs and SMEs along their path of growth. But with data, I can be able to know who is doing early stage and what businesses they are supporting. Do they have any specific sectors that I would want to support? And at what point of growth are they in that they can create a pipeline for me? So it makes a lot of sense. Beatrice, how can we steer development towards our ecosystem as hubs? And I'm asking this because I know you have experience working with other developed ecosystem. We have learned a lot and we have seen what is working. They also have their own challenges, but what can we learn?
Maybe I would start by saying that from the conversations that I've had today, I think what has been echoed time and time again is that we need to be catalysts and not, what was the word? Curators. That was the word. So we need vibrancy. This is what the lady from, that was Ndambuki, said in the morning. We need vibrancy around the ecosystem, we need also to be catalysts. That tells me that we need to grow with a little bit more speed. Maybe in the earlier years, we came in as organizing and putting the structures together, but we're getting ourselves to a launch pad for growth. And not just decent growth, but for high growth, right? And I think I would so much resonate with this because we are not working in a silo. We are working in a globalized arena where we have, startup ecosystem left, right, and center. I mean, we would go to Silicon Valley where we've seen all the kind of, tech startups that have come from here. When we look at Shanghai, Beijing, they are really all talking about robotics, artificial intelligence. When we go into maybe Palo Alto, they are talking about use of renewable energy in their startups. So you can actually see that there is already knowledge, there is milestones, there is a lot of learning that has already been created somewhere else. We are looking into Nairobi because this is a promising part of the world where, we've had quite a lot of successes, especially in the fintech area. But from the conversations we are hearing is that Nairobi is not only primarily focused on fintech, we're also hearing about health startups, we are hearing about agribusiness startups, we are hearing about digital education startups, like one that we run at Riara University. So there is quite a wide array. Of course, a lot of differences between the challenges that we experience in Nairobi and, of course, the desire to have African indigeneity in the kind of startups that we have here. But for me, what is very loud from the conversations today is that we have an asset in our people. But you see, people alone without the capabilities, without the know-how, will not still get us where we want to go. So what I heard today from the conversations that we have, we heard from, especially, that was Mary, from, the NGO sector, and from other, CBOs that are working in the area, is that there is quite a lot of knowledge that has been built in terms of how do we measure success? How do we say that these are successful brands that have been launched? This is the way we can be able to connect the value chains and be able to bring up success. So this has already been done. But in terms of learning and in terms of being aware of the same and using those kind of metrics as the ecosystem, the hub ecosystem in Nairobi, I think this is where we stand a very good opportunity. And for me, Asec, as the convener of this session, maybe would be a great platform in terms of holding workshops for the ecosystem players, in terms of what is their roles, what kind of knowledge is important in terms of driving those kind of success stories or the metrics that we are talking about. What is the know-how? What is the expertise? Is there any kind of quality assurance across all the ecosystem players? Even when we talk about innovativeness, how do we touch it? How do we measure it? How do we feel it? So there is a huge opportunity here. But for me, I see Asec as not the sole player. You're a convener of partnerships, and not just local partnerships, but global partnerships also. There are an array of institutions, universities that have been working with status ecosystems. It is possible to hold sessions like this where it can actually be learning, for the players in this particular industry. So it's really more knowledge, know-how, creation, but also quite a lot of partnerships and stakeholder engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. You have touched on all key 5 pillars of Asec mandate, which is partnership, internationalization, collaboration. So as if you know what Asec is all built on. I would want to open the floor for questions from the members present.
Thank you very much. It's a general question to all the panelists. There has been complaint from lower tier associations, and I'm not saying Asec is a lower tier association, in terms of the movement of the challenges they face, having challenges being faced within a certain space, whether it's Asec, whether it's Federation of Juakali, whether it's whatever, to the higher echelon tier 1 associations in terms of issues, and to government. I don't know, should we have a system where all these smaller associations are members of the bigger ones for the issues to be raised? Or should we have an independent platform where all these different associations come, irrespective of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and have issues addressed? I think that's a conversation that I think I've had in different spaces. Maybe I just thought maybe it's something that you can help us to think of. Of course, Kingsley, we've had this conversation with you. Maybe you shouldn't answer, but the rest maybe might have something to say about it. Thanks.
I love it that in this session with Asec, you convened and you called out interested stakeholders from various sectors. What happens with this is that each one of them carries your dialogue at another forum, at another table, right? So you may not be members, but through your participation and engagement of stakeholders in various levels, you can be able to reach the higher echelon. But also, I think from the value proposition, there must be something unique to what you're consistently speaking about. And there must be, intended impact. What is the possible impact from what your proposition is? This must really be standing out. It must also be clear. So I totally believe that the conversations around what Asec is doing must be spoken by somebody inside the government. How you get the insider of the government to speak about you, that's really around your marketing and your partnership engagement. I remember early in my years working for the chewing gum manufacturer, PK, Wrigley. And if you followed President Moi those years, wherever his congregation was gathered, you would have a share of PK somewhere. I mean, you'll always have a lot of PK to share out to everybody. Why? Because there's somebody that made sure that he was speaking with us, he was talking about us, and he had that product as he was a brand ambassador of our product. So wherever, even, you very well know that recently they have invested very largely in terms of modernizing their company and their manufacturing plant. And it is really one of the ones that was supported by Ministry of Trade and Industry, by the president, current president himself. So you have to have an insider speaking your story somewhere, even if not yourself. Thank you.
I wanted to jump into that, and Linda, I'll come to you. Oh yes, as you follow on, Linda, I wanted to ask ourselves, because I know there will be no one with that answer, right? And I think conversations and challenges at different layers are important to be channeled. But question that I keep on asking ourselves, we're already experiencing those gaps between different layers. Creating another structure, does it help solve the issue? Is it a structural issue we are facing that if you are in this tier and you have an issue, it need to be transmitted through a different layer to be able to be solved? I don't think so. I think we need to ask ourselves, where is the gap? Where is the disconnect? And how can we address it? Is it the structure that we have right now that are not addressing those gaps? Or is it plugins to the right tables that we need to be in and not create another structure? Just wondering, because creating another structure, does it solve the disconnect we are feeling already? Will it address the challenges that different layers are feeling? I don't think so. So those are the questions I would ask myself before I suggest or put a proposal, but good feedback. So, Linda.
I'm not sure how the day-to-day conversations look like at the Secretariat of Asec. But my assumption was, when I heard Victor asking that question, was we are sitting at the table at places like KEPSA. Are we doing that? Are we? We are.
Yes.
So if we are, then some of the issues, if we want to address government or country administration, shouldn't that be a platform? So what is the
Or
question
maybe the
then,
question
Victor?
is that sufficient? Is it
It's not
addressing the gap?
sufficient?
Is it a structural issue, or is it that we are not plugged in the right forums for our problem to be?
So the question,
addressed?
the reason why I asked is, of course, currently we are having conversations with different stakeholders within the entire entrepreneurship ecosystem. So we know currently that KEPSA is the only organization that is having presidential roundtable with the speaker, with all these very important cogs within government, and they can be able to influence policy. So we have Asec on this other spectrum where you are not in that table, and you have an issue that, or you have a challenge that needs to be addressed through policy, assuming that startup bill wasn't there. So the question is, do we have a framework where lower tier associations having their issues with their different can reach that level? So the question I was asking was twofold. Either we all register all our associations under either KEPSA, Chamber, CAM, and have our issues addressed, or have a bipartisan platform, not an organization, a platform similar to this, where we are all equal, where we can all have a round table with the president as a of course, I'm not sure if it's possible, but something that is an alternative if the existing channel of registering under KEPSA, your voice is not heard. That was.
I believe KEPSA didn't start the other day. So for Asec, we are 2 years old.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're getting the ground running. We are talking to government. We are also talking to the MOU signed with Konza. We are talking to Kenya. So we really can't shoot up, but what we can do is lay the foundation. KEPSA has been there for some time. There are structures that have been put in place, a lot of conversations that were already started, but what we have actually started. So I feel like we will get there. We might not have a presidential table today, but it is coming because there is groundwork being put into it.
Well, I agree with you that it will take time for us to build that clout and influence. But I think the core of it is us as an association, we need to have that strong, consistent message, as Beatrice was saying, that we have a value proposition, and when it comes to the ecosystem, there's something we are known for. That to an extent that a discussion cannot be around that without being absent. So if we push that to a large extent, at least there's always a sane mind in the table will ask, you guys are talking about startups, but Asec is not here. I see them quite loud about this. You're talking about funding. I see Asec doing a lot of this. So we need to push ourselves to that table instead of waiting to be invited. The second thing, which is the most natural thing to do, is to build affiliates with all these, the big players who get the ears of the who and who. And that still ties into our strong value proposition. When they know they're going to discuss a subject that we are experts on, it will make them look good if they had a player that is really known for that. So we just need to identify a niche as Asec and just, be consistent on the messaging. And yeah, sooner or later, we will be at those tables with or without a framework.
Diana?
I was just going to say, as we are waiting for that table, we can create our own table here. Look who's on stage. Bwana, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, boss, but see, Bwana Odua is here. These are the movers and shakers. They have come because we've invited them to come and listen to what we are saying. So to his point, there are other tables, yes, where we need that representation, And we need to reach a certain critical mass in terms of what we are able to also bring to the table. Because remember, we all deal with partners, investors. It's not just what you want, it's what you're bringing to the table. So to his message, what are we bringing to the table? If we say he needs data, he needs partners he can work with, implement through. So do we then start, like we're saying as Asec, we start working on putting those infrastructures.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we are all entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is not pretty. Our table doesn't need to be pretty. Our table can just start with Bwana Odua here, Mr. Kipuri there, and then we say, these are the issues we want to table as ourselves. And at that table, we will be the loudest voice because we are the only ones at that table. We are the ones who know where the shoe pinches, right? So as we wait for the big prayer breakfasts type of scenario, we are hustlers. Our table is here. That's what I just want to say. It is here and there are already 2 people. Yeah. So this is where we need to do and say, Bwana Odua in January or Mr. Kipuri, these are what we think are the priority areas. Tell us what you need from us. We tell you what is possible, what is not, and then we tell you what we want to bring to the table. And then maybe say we work on one thing, just one. We deliver that one and we know it has a ripple effect. Yeah. So that was just my point to say our table is already here.
Thank you so much. And I want us to appreciate Diana. Let's appreciate Diana. And as I give floor to Stephen, I also wanted to acknowledge, I don't think even we are saying we need to create a table. We already have a table, right? I don't think we would have had conversation with Stephen for so many years, right? And in so many forums if we didn't have a table. And they saw the need to invite us to be in that table because we had our own table. So we start with acknowledging it might be messy, it's a bit chaotic because we are forming, we are entrepreneurs, but there is a table. I think that the question is, how do we make our table more organized? What is that we need to do? What is the agenda we need to push towards those who can project what we need to be heard in those higher tables? So.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll just echo what has been raised by Diana in the sense that indeed we started a private sector roundtable. I'm sure you all know now we have an SME roundtable, and I'm looking forward to very soon having the innovation ecosystem roundtable coming in also. So it's a step, but I want to encourage us to join up, affiliate, so that there are very many lessons you learned by coming together, just like has already been raised. So let's keep the momentum. The value is coming, and the table is also coming. Thank you.
So we have been given a channel, a platform. We can create an innovation table, and it's open. It's for us to grab, and we just need. We are here. We have what it takes. So it's just a matter of claiming what is ours, right? So I would want to move to Kingsley.
I think I was very surprised, just to echo I think Diana, because I think PS Kevin Desai was joined in the morning, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
You had the senator join, you had us join. So I think Asec is maybe not, you're not giving yourselves enough credit for your for your role in the space and the space that you started taking up. But to be fair, I really appreciate the concern around, one, wanting to be part of giant umbrellas and forming umbrellas because you have critical mass, but at the same time, maybe your message is watered down. But I think there's a real need for this particular segment. I think the challenge is not new, to be honest, and you're pioneering that in a way. I think we see it quite often, where the very small micro entrepreneurs, particularly in the Juakali space, have a very specific way of organizing and being heard, and the very large players which have been discussed have a very particular way. I think that individual segment there is still trying to find itself, whether it's the manufacturing space, whether it's the innovation space. So I think partially it's the challenge is here, and I think the challenge is being taken up very well. Part of it, I think, is on the government side to also understand and personally, internally differentiate and understand the value and the growth potential in those specific subsections. So it's not Asec coming and being like, okay, we are sitting, remind me why this is important again, or remind me why you're different from the other guy. Because I think the State Department of Industry, the Executive Office of the President, Treasury, and the rest, and this is already happening, I can guarantee that, is appreciating where growth is going to come from. And it's going to come from ecosystem players and entrepreneurs in rooms like this. So I think you will slowly also start to see the other side of the table taking on some of that definition and appreciation work. So you're not doing all this value, every meeting, you're justifying why Asec has to exist and why you're different from the next association, because I think you'll find slowly that the partner on the other side of the table is also really appreciating and I think calling you to their table more and more. So I think a lot has been done and you're also on the cusp of a lot, I can guarantee that.
Let's appreciate that again. So I think that's a good message for us. So I would want to give the panelists a chance to share their wrapping remarks. As part of this conversation, we have discussed a lot. Also, your parting shots?
My closing remarks would really be, let's not look too far when we're talking about partnership. It can be very small things. We saw an example that was one that shocked a lot of people. Meta and Ivy Garage came together to form a community. We've seen other different spaces that have decided to come together. So let's not push the needle too far. We've seen a lot of conversations that we are targeting constantly big projects and everything, but it could be just a small, let's work together to build a framework. Let's come together and build a code of conduct, for example, which we've already done. Let's come together and say that we will decide if a startup has gone through more than 5 accelerators, they shouldn't go through any other accelerator. Let's come together and solve certain problems that we're dealing with. Let's come together and talk to agencies and say, don't cap our grants this way. Let's come together and solve different needs. We don't need to constantly push too far. And even as much as we're talking about the big tables, let's remember that we need to work with what we're dealing with at home. And as Kingsley said also, working with our entrepreneurs, understanding what our entrepreneurs need. So our heads are not too up in the clouds. We're actually working what's happening in the grassroots. Yeah.
Thank you. James?
Well, I think I agree that we've done a lot because 2 years ago we didn't have this platform, and today we have a platform that we can have this conversation going on. And it's important for us to note that outside we are being judged as the Kenyan ecosystem. Nobody, when they look into Kenya, when they're making the initial decisions, they're not zooming into VIFA, they're not zooming into Growth Africa, They want to see how's the ecosystem in Kenya performing. So for us to have a better ecosystem, we all need to work together. It's actually really for our benefit. When Kenya is known to be the destination for innovative startups, there'll be more resources coming our way, even from government, because KRA, they like money. They will be sure, okay, if we support more startups, there'll be more revenue in the future. Government will see if growth is coming from startup, they'll focus there. Development agency will also focus there. So a better ecosystem is good for each and every player in this space. So as a result, I just want to encourage all of us to think about partnership, and things will get better. Thank you.
Asante. So I think I have a bit of a broken record in terms of just commending the power of this and the necessity. I can't overstate just the value of spaces and collaborative spaces like this in terms of, I think firstly, the convening energy. I think second, what it starts to do is give us a common language in our little pockets, and I know language was discussed. I think it was our colleague who discussed the different languages. So I think we start to have a common language, and I think Asec has a great role beyond convening and common language in terms of being a bit of a scorecard on how we're doing. And I think being an accountability partner to the other players, we discussed the academia and the government as well. So I'd just like to, just commend how far we've come. I'm excited to be part of the second, I suppose, annual conference. And then just challenge to please hold the other players accountable, ourselves included. with that scorecard mentality and saying, hapa ndio tumefika. Number of hubs, number of accelerators, sustainability issues, and potential. Because the big sale is potential. And challenging and saying, if you have this much government support, this is what we get back in 5, 10, 20 years in terms of the things we like to hear, which is tax revenue, growth, employment and jobs and the rest. So I think I can't commend enough how far you've come, and I can barely just project how great the need is and how bright the future is in terms of the people in this room. So please hold us accountable, make us uncomfortable, and challenge government to keep up on the policy side, on the regulatory side, and on the definition and understanding side to really understand the value of these particular niche of entrepreneurs, of the ecosystem players, and then of that collaborative framework together with academia and the finance world to push the space forward. So thanks a lot.
Maybe for me, two things. One is the bill. So what I heard very closely is that let's all plug in. Let's all do what it takes to ensure that bill is a success and is passed. You know, when I hear Nigeria would take the Kenyan bill and copy word for word, I think that tells you a story, that there is something strong, there is something positive, there is something immeasurable that is communicated in that bill. What does it take to ensure that it is passed? That's the first one. Number two, capability, capability, capability. People, yes, but without knowledge, excellence in what they are doing, maybe still not going anywhere. How about maybe even an academy within Asec to train the stakeholders? You know, when we talk about a hub, what is an excellent hub? What are the standards? What are the qualifications? How do we get there? Are there stages of growing in terms of how we are getting there? So for me, this is another area and another direction that we could take. Number three, what does it take to even have one unicorn, 2 or 3? What does it take? I'm telling you, the day you have 1 or 2, you won't even ask for permission to sit at those tables. They will come seeking for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very good way to end our conversation. I do want to appreciate all of you for amazing, amazing conversation, and the audience, both physical and online. My key takeout is that we have a table. We need to claim it and own it and have the right conversation. And I will take personal responsibility, being in the board, to make sure that this is executed. And we talk about it in our next annual general conference. Thank you so much.